A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, let's talk Eurovision. It's been making waves. The performers have been pushing every boundary and looking for shock value, whether it is the political agenda or sexualisation or pushing the LGBTQIA ideology. And it's become a major platform for pro-Palestinian anti-Semitism. Well, Greg Bondar is national spokesperson for Christian Voice Australia, national think tank and advocacy group for families, liberty and faith. He's got his own thoughts. Greg Bondar, a special welcome along to 2020.
Oh, good morning, Neil. Hope all is well.
Hey, Greg, Eurovision, you're calling it decadent and profane. Give us your, don't hold back here. What are your insights?
Now, look, I was talking to my wife and I said, darling, as I call her, Neil, I said, look, let's sit down and we'll watch a bit of TV and we'll watch the SBS program, Eurovision, see what they've got coming on this year. Well, Neil, from the word go, it ended up being nothing but a display of talentless performances promoting political agendas, sexualisation, LGBTIQA plus ideology, all in the name of so-called entertainment. My wife and I were absolutely appalled. This is what's being called entertainment in this day and age. So, Neil, a great disaster from my point of view.
Okay. Well, you know what? Political agendas and sexualisation, but some people might take issue with you here, Greg. You might be showing your age by saying talentless performances because a lot of young people just loved the sort of creativity, if you can call it that those performers brought.
Oh, now, look, let's go back to 1974, and I am showing my age. When ABBA were on. Now, that was good old-fashioned entertainment. It was clear. I could hear the words, actually, Neil. And not only that, it was the only Eurovision winner, Neil, in 1974. They've sold over 285 million records. I guarantee you, Neil, none of the performers that we saw on Eurovision this year will sell more than 100 records, in my view, Neil.
Okay, hearkening back to the ABBA days, Waterloo, I think the song was, that was their winning entry back in those days. Yeah. Would you say, Greg, there's been a slippery slope or there's been a disintegration of the virtuousness of the quirky creativity that you might have seen over the years, that's now sort of crossed a boundary? How would you describe it?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Now, look, let's go back to a bit of history. Eurovision started in 1956. There were 7 countries involved: Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium, Germany, France, Luxembourg and Italy. And it was meant to be, the original vision was for an apolitical and wholesome song fest that would transcend political differences and draw the nations together. Well, Neil, they've totally departed from that. It is now nothing more than the opportunity to protest against various political issues, such as the pro-Palestinian people, and it's now sexualisation. It is now promoting ideology in the LGBTIQA spectrum. Neil, it's gone away from what it was meant to be, which was meant to be, as I said, a apolitical, wholesome song fest that would actually transcend political differences. Well, Neil, that's changing, and I'm afraid now that the entertainment is now nothing more than a mouthpiece for ideology. Neil,
there's an old saying, Greg: no publicity is bad publicity, and you know what? Even us talking about it probably just falls into the promotion of such an event, and they love it because it really is. There's no boundaries now. All the boundaries have been pushed way out. The sorts of entries that came into this year's competition, you've picked out a few there for special mention. Give us your insight here.
Yeah, in particular, Neil, if you look at the 2024 entries, and I'm just going to pick a couple here. The UK entry, for example, this was all about being scantily clad. It was raunchy. And the UK entry, it was set in a post-apocalyptic boxing gym, and it was hurtling towards Earth. But do you know what it was? In fact, it was a couple of male dancers, about 4 or 5, I think, who were energetically gyrating around the singer Ollie Alexander, the lead singer. And it was all about highly sexualised celebration and promotion of gay love. Now, I don't want my grandchildren looking at that. I don't want anybody looking at that, really. It's meant to be a simple, wholesome entertainment. But wait, Ireland, you'll love this, Neil, is an ideologically driven entry as well. What happened there was it was performed by a non-binary singer. And this particular person, and being Irish, had the words ceasefire and free Palestine written in the old Irish alphabet, which is the Ogham language, and they had to remove it. But there you go. All they're doing now is promoting ideology. I want to watch some entertainment with my children, my grandchildren. I don't want to watch ideologically driven entertainment now.
So the entertainment has become the advertising for those who are pushing all sorts of different ideologies to what we might think are good ideologies to hold to. But as you say, a non-binary singer, the Irish one, Bambi Thug, and but both goth, gremlin, goblin, witch. So yeah, when you talk about pushing boundaries, that certainly is pushing boundaries, and having a candlelit séance.
Yes, it's absolutely right, and not only that, but it is now sort of allowing people to voice their ideology. But you know, it really Eurovision event is now a showpiece and mouthpiece of a fractured, decadent, and increasingly pagan society now, which really worries me. And it's all cloaked in glitz, glamour, and sequins in the name of entertainment. For goodness sake, Neil, this is a really, really sad day, I think. But if we're going to, I'm going to encourage everybody next year not to watch it if they can, and try and watch something. Maybe watch Sound of Music now.
Stay with Bambi Thug for a few moments. The goth, gremlin, goblin, witch with the words ceasefire and free Palestine. It's part of, there's occult you can complain about in there too, but the really deeply disturbing aspect is that here's an entertainment that is featuring and promoting an anti-Semitism that's stirring up a crowd into an anti-Semitic frenzy. That's a real challenge, isn't it?
Well, it is now, because the Israeli entrant had to be confined to her hotel room because of fear of violence, and that's sad when you're getting the audience and the viewers to stir them up to hate Jews or the Israeli entrant. That is terrible, and it's anti-Semitism, and it's in its highest level. And I'm really opposed to that, Neil.
And the unstoppable, you might say, push for an anti-Semitism, the pro-Palestinian demonstrators, and that was broadcast to the world. So imagine the number of people who are influenced by that. Oh,
just imagine. Here are kids will be watching this because of the entertainment, the glitz and the glamour, and they'll be watching that and they'll be saying, "Oh, look at all these entertainers. They're all saying that the Palestinians are correct and the Jews are wrong, or Israelis wrong." And what's going to happen is you're brainwashing them. You are actually, socially engineering these young kids through entertainment. And I think that is so wrong, and we should all be speaking up, as of today.
So what used to be one of those seemingly benign type of opportunities for your teenagers to get into weird and wonderful presentations of music, it's become something that I'm imagining here you might have a thought or two about, where a Christian parent might have their own thoughts and perhaps even rein in their own kids if they can. What are your thoughts here for families who've thought that this is fairly innocuous, and but this is clearly not the case?
Yeah, well, exactly. You make the point. It's not innocuous. The problem is that Eurovision has become a vehicle for interest groups to pound home their political message, sexual liberalism, good old-fashioned anarchy, political socialism. Do you want your grandchildren watching this? You don't, Neil. So I think families must be aware that, come next year, that they make some sort of a radar and make sure that they're not watching this sort of entertainment, because I think they've lost all of its original intention of being a wholesome songfest, Neil.
There's a warning for parents and what you're allowing your children to watch. And yes, Eurovision might be one of those that you might want to think again about. Hey, let's move on to some other issues. The campaign around those recommendations of the Australian Law Reform Commission to do with religious schools. You led a delegation, Greg Bondar, to find out about what the possible legislation might look like. What did you discover?
Oh, no, look, I did lead a delegation, and I want to thank CEO Robert Gregory from the Australian Jewish Association, a good friend of mine, James Dargan, who's an Indigenous elder and a pastor, and the three of us met with Senator Cash and Senator Henderson, albeit Senator Henderson was via Zoom, but in person we sat down with Senator Cash and Neil. We went through that. Now, you've got to appreciate that Labor did not release the actual copies of this proposed legislation. What they did was they've given it to the opposition, and they said to the opposition, oh, you can discuss this with who you like, but they can't take it away, they can't copy it. We couldn't do anything. But once we went through the proposed bill, Neil, I have to tell you, this is the worst piece of legislation that's been proposed in all my time as an apologist for family, freedom and faith. So, Neil, it is a deadly weapon, and I'm going to encourage everybody to contact their MP and say, we want to look at the proposed legislation because it's going to cause so much, angst. In particular, I think it will spell the death of Christian schools now as it goes through.
You're picking up on a particular example too, because in your new role that we were talking about last time, CEO now of Every Home for Christ, a global organisation, with the initiative to conduct some schools of prayer around Australia. That's the sort of thing would not be allowed under the sorts of things that are being proposed by the ALRC.
Correct, Neil, and I made this specific point to Senator Cash and her advisors. I said, look, I've got a program of going around the States, around Australia, to run various schools of prayer because, virtually what we're saying is 1 hour of prayer a day will change the world now. So we're going to go around and do that. Now, under the current proposed legislation, I won't be able to do that because it only takes one person to complain against me. And two, Sunday schools. You might see the end of Sunday schools because, you see, one of the things that's in the bill is that whoever complains against you, whether they win or not, I have to pay the court costs. Now, that's ridiculous. So what you're doing is encouraging people to take action against Christians, and whether I win or not, I'll still have to pay the legal fees. Now, that is outrageous.
So an encouragement to what we often brand lawfare, arming people to take pot shots at Christian believers. Hey, let me ask you about Christian schools here, because there's been a lot of discussion, and there's a little bit of a balance here, because if you're in Christian schools, you don't want people saying this spells the death of Christian schools. But if you want to speak about the reality, how do you see it from your end? Because this is the sort of thing that is being talked about in these higher levels of commentary.
Yeah, Neil, let me rephrase my question, my statement. It spells the death of Christian schools from the point of view of being able to declare your faith publicly in the classroom, whether it's religious education, whether it's a prayer. It spells the death of all those activities. The schools might go on, but the schools will be now filled with all sorts of people like LGBTI people, transgender people, whatever it might be. And you won't be able to stop them from expressing their view, but we are stopped from expressing our view. That is the Christian view. So that spells the death of our faith, Neil, and I think I'm really worried about that. The schools, as I said, may go on, but they won't go in the sense that we knew them. When I sent my kids to Christian school, those days are gone now.
Now, church organisations, with archbishops and priests and pastors and leaders, they've united together and written a number of open letters to the Prime Minister, and they're expressing their concerns about the sort of legislation that could be coming. From what I understand, Greg, there are even some churches that are supporting this bill. Any thoughts here on whether people have got their, all their thoughts together in the right way?
Yeah, Neil, I'm really, really disappointed in some of the churches. I'm not going to mention them, the denominations, I should say, because what's happened is that some have written to Albanese, Prime Minister, have written to the Attorney General, and what they're saying is, oh, yeah, this is a great bill, but they haven't read the fine print. But moreover, the problem is they're saying, oh, some proposed legislation is better than none. Well, no, Neil, this legislation is not acceptable. In my view, we're better off having the status quo where we still have Section 38 of the Sex Discrimination Act. Once this bill comes, it won't have any of that, and Fair Work will also be affected. So, Neil, no, I think the churches need to stand up and read the fine print.
So there's fine print that you would need to be warned about. And as I hear your heartbeat here, Greg Bondar, better off with the status quo. Do nothing, because the thought of trying to protect religious freedom may well be used, a lot of weasel words in legislation that actually might be used as something to bludgeon the Christian church. So better off with do nothing and go with current legislation.
Well, that seems to be the case, unless the opposition can change the mind of Labor on this and make sure there are amendments to it, which I don't think Labor will accept. We're better off with nothing and just have the status quo now. Yeah.
What are your thoughts here, maybe predicting what might come with this? Because there's some thought that because there will be a division and no sort of bipartisan support for it, that it may not even get off the ground and we may well just be with the status quo and no protections, especially for religion. And as you're saying, that might even be the best way to see an outcome. But what are your predictions that what might happen so far as the rest of this year comes?
Well, as you know, Neil, I've been in politics a long time. I've worked for the Prime Minister. My prediction is that this bill is going to be brought forward sooner than we think, with the intent of making the opposition look bad, because they won't agree to it, I shouldn't think, in its current form. And then Labor will be able to go to the election early next year and say, look, we tried to get the bill through, but the opposition wouldn't agree. Don't vote for them. And I think that's going to be the scenario, Neil, and it's sad, but I think that's the way Labor are going to play the game, but I could be wrong.
A surprise tabling of the bill, anti-discrimination, religious freedom, all sorts of ways that people will be able to characterise what this bill will be, but a surprise tabling, catching everyone off guard, cornering the opposition and pushing them to accept the changes that the Labor Party wants, and when they don't, using that as a weapon against them in the next federal election. That's the sort of thing you're saying?
That's my take on it, and I think that's probably good politics, but bad legislation, because all of us as Christians are going to regret not having spoken up and forced the issue with Labor. We need to do it now if we're going to do it at all.
So, speaking up, what does that mean? Getting in touch with your local MPs, state and federal?
Yeah, more than that, Neil. It means that you get onto Labor and the Prime Minister and say, we want to see the bill. How come you've only given it to the opposition and a few churches? Why don't you give it to the Australian public who vote? Give it to them. That's what's required. I want to see the bill in its totality, not bits and pieces. And unfortunately, as I said, Senator Cash could not let us take it away, wouldn't let us copy it. I want to see the bill, as should you, Neil, but they won't release it. Yeah. Why? They've got something to hide.
Okay. Well, Greg Bondar, let me point listeners to christianvoiceaustralia.blog, and listeners might be looking for some insight there that they might be able to run with. But as you say, the legislation's not publicly released and you didn't get to copy anything, but you only got to talk about it. Greg Bondar, Christian Voice Australia, a think tank and advocacy group for families, liberty and faith, christianvoiceaustralia.blog. And so far as the Eurovision part of our conversation went, there was an article you had published in The Spectator Australia, and I could point listeners to that to hear and read some more of your insights. But Greg Bondar, thank you so much for taking some time to share your thoughts with us once again today on 2020.
Thank you, Neil, and God bless.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.